Rain fell in a steady curtain over the cemetery, soaking through my overcoat and into my shoes. But I barely noticed. The priest mumbled something about peace and eternal rest as the casket was lowered into the ground. My father, Thomas Weller, was 71 years old when his heart finally gave out after a 2-year battle with everything: cancer, diabetes, a broken spirit. The man had been more shadow than human by the end. Watching him go wasn't the hard part. Watching him disappear from my life completely, that was. My name is Mark, 38, architect, only child. My mother passed when I was 19, so it had just been the two of us for a long time. He was old school, built things with his hands, trusted hard work, spoke when he had something worth saying. We didn't always get along, but he was solid, the kind of man who showed up and stayed. I hadn't realized how rare that was until much later. The service was small, a few neighbors, one uncle, a couple guys from the hardware store where he worked part-time after retirement. My wife, Lila, didn't come. She sent a text that morning. "I just can't, Mark. It's too much. I'm emotionally overwhelmed." I didn't respond. What was there to say? We'd been drifting for months. No real fights, just silence stretching between us like old floorboards ready to crack. She'd stopped asking about my projects, stopped coming with me to visit my dad. I stopped trying to figure out why. Maybe we both just got tired at the same time. After the burial, I drove home with the window cracked, despite the rain. The road blurred behind me. The grief was like a low-grade fever, present but manageable. I kept thinking I'd walk through the door and Lila would be waiting. Maybe we'd eat something. Maybe we wouldn't talk much. But she'd be there. Instead, when I turned the key and pushed open the front door, I stepped into silence and emptiness. No couch, no dining table, no framed photos on the wall, just echoes and dust outlines on the floor where furniture used to be. It took a full minute before I even moved. My throat was dry. I walked through the house like a man tracing the scene of a robbery, and then I saw the note. It was folded once, sitting on the kitchen counter where the coffee maker used to be. My name was written in Lila's handwriting, precise, elegant, a little too careful. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there, the fridge humming louder in the absence of everything else. When I finally read it, there were only 9 words. "I need to start over. Don't come looking for me." The signature was missing. I walked through the house in a daze. The closets were empty, drawers pulled out and stripped bare. Even the extra set of bedsheets was gone. Our wedding album, the art books I'd collected from architecture school, the painting we bought on our honeymoon, gone. I went to the garage. Her car wasn't there. Neither was mine. I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from the funeral home, one from a number I didn't recognize. No texts. I dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. That's when the panic set in. Not a frantic, screaming panic. Something colder, slower, like ice creeping under the skin. I opened my laptop, logged into our bank account. It took longer than usual to load. Balance: $0 and 0 cents. I checked our savings, also empty. 3 transfers over the last 2 weeks. One just yesterday. She'd been draining everything while I was watching my father die. I sat down in the middle of the hallway, not because I was tired, but because there was nowhere else to sit. I looked around at the bare walls and blank floors and tried to remember what had been here just 3 days ago. what we were, who we were. None of it felt real. I tried calling again, disconnected. It wasn't just the furniture or the money or the silence. It was the precision, the planning. She hadn't broken down. She'd prepared for this, waited for the one moment I couldn't possibly fight back, my father's funeral, to make her move. And she didn't just leave me. She erased me. What she didn't know was, I don't shatter. I rebuild. Quietly. Carefully. And when I'm done, you don't even recognize the wreckage. The first time I noticed something off was a year ago, maybe more. Lila came home from one of her wellness retreats, talking about energy alignment and personal clarity. She'd gone away for a long weekend with some women she met at her Pilates studio, none of whom I ever saw in person. They had names like Sage and Ember and claimed mushrooms could unlock ancestral healing. I figured it was harmless. People go through phases, but the distance didn't end when she unpacked her suitcase. She stopped joining me at my father's place on Sundays, said the drive was too much. When I pushed, she said he made her feel judged. Your dad never liked me, she told me one night while scrolling through her phone. I can feel it in the way he looks at me. I told her she was wrong. She just smiled and said nothing. Then came the talk about the cabin. My father's cabin sat on 10 acres 2 hours north. Just pine trees, a wood stove, and quiet. It was the only place he still felt like himself in the last year. Every couple of weeks I'd take him up there. We'd chop wood, drink terrible coffee, and not talk much. It was therapy, the kind that didn't need words. When I got home, Lila would roll her eyes. You should sell it, she said more than once. It's just a pile of rotting wood in the middle of nowhere. It's not practical, Mark. It wasn't supposed to be practical. It was supposed to be ours. I told her no every time. The last time my dad was at the cabin, he was tired. Too tired to walk down to the creek. He just sat on the porch and watched the trees for over an hour. When we packed up to leave, he put a hand on my shoulder. She's not what she seems, son. I laughed it off. I told him he was just old and suspicious. He didn't argue. He never did. But he gave me a long look, the kind that sits in your bones afterward. I didn't know what he meant then. I do now. The office smelled like paper and disappointment. My lawyer, a tall woman with sharp eyes named Dana Ellis, slid a stack of documents across the table without saying a word. I already knew it was bad. You can tell a lot by how lawyers breathe. She filed 2 days before your father's funeral, Dana said. Cited abandonment, mental cruelty, and irreconcilable differences. All standard boilerplate. I blinked. Abandonment? I was in hospice care with my dying father. She didn't respond, just tapped the next page. She also filed for a temporary financial restraining order, froze joint assets, moved a significant portion into an account solely under her name. She emptied it, I said. I checked last night. Dana nodded. There's more. She filed a quitclaim deed on your house 6 weeks ago. Didn't go through. Your name's still on the title, but she tried. She tried to steal the house? She's not dumb, Dana said. Just fast. I swallowed hard. What about the cabin? It's safe. Still under your name alone. No filings on that one. My guess? She doesn't know you still own it. I sat back in the chair, stunned. She even took the dog. Dana looked up from her notes. Excuse me? Charlie. our golden retriever. I didn't see him at the house. Dana sighed. We'll add that to the list. My fingers curled into fists in my lap. Not from rage, not yet. From the surreal clarity that this wasn't impulsive. This was mapped out, executed with precision, and I'd walked straight into it without ever noticing the signs. She waited until I couldn't defend myself. She waited until you were most vulnerable, Dana said. That's not a coincidence. I thought about the last hug we shared. It wasn't love. It was a goodbye I hadn't understood yet. She's going to come for the cabin eventually, I said quietly. Dana nodded. Let her try. Outside, the sky was gray, heavy with rain again. I stood on the steps of the courthouse, soaked through with a different kind of grief now. I'd already buried one person I loved. I wasn't about to let someone else bury what was mine. The road to the cabin was still a mess of gravel and half-buried pine needles, just like I remembered. It was early morning when I pulled off the main highway and took the winding turn up the ridge. Fog clung low to the trees like it didn't want to let go. The kind of quiet that made you feel small. I hadn't been back since Dad passed. Not because I didn't want to, just hadn't had space to breathe. Between hospital visits, paperwork, and Lila slowly fading out of our marriage, the cabin had started to feel like something from another life. But I needed distance now. From the empty house, the lawyer's cold words, and Lila's ghost still haunting the place she burned down. The cabin was just as we'd left it. Weathered wood, stone chimney, porch swing still hanging crooked from the last time Dad tried to fix it. I stepped inside and immediately felt something shift. No furniture missing, no drawers rifled through. She hadn't touched it. She didn't even know it existed. I walked the perimeter just to be sure. Everything intact. Even the old canoe still hung in the rafters. A dusty comfort settled over me. This place wasn't just mine in memory. It was mine, in fact. 2 weeks before Dad went into hospice, he had me drive him into town. We met with a notary. He told me it was a paperwork update, nothing major. I signed a few things, didn't ask too many questions. Grief has a way of shrinking your focus. But Dana had explained it in plain terms at our last meeting. A second deed had been filed, transferring full ownership of the property to me, privately, securely. No joint names, no claims. Not even Lila knew it existed. It was Dad's final insurance policy. I leaned against the old fireplace, letting the silence settle. For the first time in days, I felt the edges of my mind start to come back together. She'd taken the house, the bank account, the dog, the life we built. But she didn't take this. She didn't even know enough to look for it. The safe was behind the bookshelf. I remembered it because Dad once mentioned it years ago over a cup of coffee, offhand like he was talking about the weather. Put something away in case life decides to take a turn, he'd said, tapping his temple. Not everything you build is on paper. I never thought much of it until now. It took 15 minutes to drag the shelf aside and another 10 to brush off the dust and cobwebs. The safe was small, matte gray, and tucked into the wall studs behind a false panel. No keypad, just a keyhole and a combination dial. I opened the drawer beside the wood stove where he used to keep his fishing gear and found a metal box labeled "Spare Keys." Inside, wrapped in a Ziploc, was a small brass key and a faded sticky note, 19-7-42. The safe creaked open on the first try. Inside were 4 items. First, a worn manila envelope labeled land titles, not just for the cabin, but for 2 adjoining lots I didn't even know he'd bought. Untouched, undeveloped, and still under his name. I set those aside carefully. Next, a small lockbox filled with rolled-up bills, hundreds, maybe thousands, all in crisp 20s. Beneath the cash was a little pocket-sized photo of me and him fishing when I was maybe 12. I didn't know he kept that. Then came a flash drive, unmarked but freshly labeled with masking tape. Look if you need to. And last, a stack of letters. Not long, maybe 5 or 6 in total. Each one handwritten, dated, and sealed. The top one said, in his neat block print, "For when it all falls apart." I didn't open any of them yet. Instead, I sat on the couch with the envelope in my lap, the fire crackling low, and listened to the wind outside hit the eaves like it always had. My father had known something, not just about Lila, maybe not even about her specifically. He'd known about the way life unravels, slowly, then all at once. And somehow, he'd prepared for it. This wasn't just my backup plan now. It was my reset button. I didn't open the first letter until morning. The cabin had a way of pressing the world quiet, letting things land with the weight they deserved. The paper was thick, cream-colored, folded neatly into thirds. My father's handwriting was precise, each line deliberate. "Mark, if you're reading this, it means something came undone. Maybe your marriage, maybe your foundation, maybe both. Either way, this is me, trying to help from wherever I am." The letter wasn't sentimental. It was practical, detailed, a blueprint for survival. He explained how, after Mom died, he'd started setting things aside just in case. A separate account in my name, funded slowly over time. Property in my name, not his, to avoid probate and prying hands. Investments under a holding company tied to the land. Nothing flashy, just safe. And then, there was Lila. I never wanted to meddle, but I watched. I listened. She never talked to me directly, not really. Always seemed more interested in what you could give her than who you were. I hope I'm wrong, but I planned like I was right. The second letter was shorter. Instructions on accessing a local bank box and a security firm that held copies of key documents. The third letter simply said, "Watch the drive." I plugged it into my laptop. Inside were labeled folders, his digital journal, spreadsheets, scanned receipts, copies of property filings. There was also video, clips from the house security system I'd installed 2 years ago. Dad had downloaded everything to his drive before he got too sick to manage it. He'd noticed unusual late-night activity, Lila leaving and returning at odd hours while I was away. One clip showed her pulling a duffel bag from the closet and loading it into her trunk. Another showed her standing in the kitchen, shredding mail. My chest went cold. This wasn't just insurance. It was proof. He hadn't just protected me. He'd been watching out for me when I wasn't watching for myself. I stopped grieving sometime around sunset. Not for my dad. That grief stayed. But for the illusion I'd been living under. The version of Lila I'd held on to. The marriage I thought I'd built. The trust I assumed we shared. That all burned off like fog when the sun finally hit it. What replaced it wasn't rage. It was clarity. I started making calls the next day. Old colleagues, contacts from past projects, city permit officers. One of the perks of being an architect in a city like Spokane was knowing who did what, when, and where. I wasn't looking for gossip. I was looking for movement. By the end of the week, I had my answer. Lila was trying to sell one of our rental properties, a duplex we'd bought 5 years back. It had been under both our names, but the mortgage had always come from my accounts. She filed paperwork last month to shift ownership into an LLC. The signature wasn't mine, but it looked close. I sent the documents to Dana. She confirmed it was fraudulent. She's either sloppy or confident, she said. Probably both. That same day, I hired a private investigator. His name was Rob, ex-military, quiet type. The kind of guy who didn't blink when I slid him a folder with Lila's last known addresses and a photo of her standing beside my dog, smiling like she hadn't detonated my life. Discreet? He asked. I nodded. Just find out what she's planning and who she's planning it with. 2 days later, he sent the first update. New apartment under a different name. Weekly meetings with a man named Carter Willis, mid-40s, real estate developer with a reputation for creative acquisitions. Rob said they'd been seen entering a title office together. Twice. She wasn't starting over. She was building something and using what I'd built as the foundation. That was her mistake. She assumed she'd gutted me, but I wasn't broken. I was drafting a new plan. And this time, she wouldn't see it coming. Rob called just after 9 p.m. His voice was calm, steady, but there was something underneath it this time, like he'd been holding his breath. You're gonna want to sit down, he said. I already was. He sent the photos first, grainy, zoomed-in shots from across a restaurant patio. Lila, hair pulled back, laughing like she'd won something. Across from her, a man in a gray suit, hand on her wrist. His name was Alan Mercer, the same name printed across the top of every legal document I'd been served 2 weeks ago. Her divorce attorney. They weren't just planning the divorce together, they were sleeping together. According to Rob, it had been going on for a year. Late-night meetups, weekend getaways listed as legal conferences, even a weekend in Tahoe billed directly to her retainer. I didn't feel shock, not even anger, just confirmation of what I'd already started to suspect. This wasn't a reaction. This was a project. Alan wasn't just representing her. He was helping her move chess pieces. He'd helped her draft forged documents, retitle assets, and mask ownership trails. And the duplex? Rob found paperwork being prepared to flip it, sell below market to a shell company tied back to one of Alan's former clients. Legal laundering, Rob called it. I sat in the dark after that call, the only light coming from the laptop screen. Lila's face stared back at me in pixelated stillness, frozen in a smile I didn't recognize anymore. She thought she was playing a game, but I built structures for a living. I know how to reinforce weak points. I know how to watch for cracks before they become collapses. And she just handed me the blueprint. Dana stared at the photos, one eyebrow slightly raised. Well, that's a first, she muttered. I've had hostile spouses before. Never had to litigate against a colleague sleeping with the opposing party. We laid it all out. Rob's reports, the forged documents, the sale filings, and Alan's financial ties to the LLC purchasing the duplex. This is collusion, Dana said, and it's textbook fraud. I showed her the prenup too. Lila never liked to talk about it, pretended it didn't matter, said she'd never marry for money, but it existed. Drafted right before our wedding, notarized, airtight. It clearly outlined that in the event of infidelity, any shared marital assets would revert fully to the non-offending party. She never challenged it, Dana said, flipping pages. She probably forgot it existed, or figured it wouldn't hold up. Will it? I asked. Dana smiled. If we prove she was involved with Alan before the separation, and I believe we already have, it's not just enforceable, it's devastating. There was only one catch. She'll try to paint you as vindictive. The moment this gets aggressive, she'll flip it. Claim you're punishing her, trying to ruin her life. So what's the play? We don't hit first, Dana said. We build the trap, document everything, let her walk into it on her own. You don't need to destroy her. You just need to let her hand you the match. We started filing. Quietly. A notice to contest the sale of the duplex. A motion for discovery on Alan's financial disclosures. A formal subpoena for Rob's surveillance material. All done legally, all by the book. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was architecture. And I was laying the foundation for collapse. She opened the door wearing silk, not pajamas, loungewear, the kind of expensive comfort that says, I've already won. Behind her, I could see polished concrete floors, minimalist furniture, a view of the city skyline framed by floor-to-ceiling windows. The condo wasn't just expensive, it was smug. Mark, she said, like I was a nosy neighbor instead of her ex-husband with years of my life in her rear view. You should have called. I didn't want to give you time to prepare. That made her blink, just once. Then the smile returned, thinner now. I'm not staying long, I said. I handed her a folder, thick and neatly bound. Just wanted to make sure you've seen this. She flipped through the pages casually at first, then slower. Copies of the prenup, signed affidavits from notaries, screenshots of text messages, surveillance photos, the duplex sale documents with forged signatures, her signature beside Alan's on a falsified title transfer. What is this? She asked, voice sharper than before. Proof, I said, of fraud, collusion, breach of contract, illegal use of power of attorney while I was caring for my dying father. Pick one. You have no idea what you're doing. I tilted my head, don't I? She dropped the folder onto the kitchen counter. The sound echoed. This is between us, she said, moving closer. We don't need lawyers. You're better than this. No, I said evenly. I'm just finally showing you what better looks like. She tried to recover, tried to wear that same look she used in court filings, the one that read like she was just misunderstood. But something had shifted. She could feel it. The control was gone. I loved you, Mark, she said quietly. No, I replied. You invested in me. Thought you could flip me like a property. And now the market's turned. I turned to leave. She didn't follow. She didn't have to. The next time I'd see her would be in front of a judge. And this time, she wouldn't be wearing silk. It rained that morning. Fitting. Inside the courthouse, Dana laid out the case like she was assembling blueprints. Precise, methodical, unemotional. Exhibit A through M signatures, transfers, surveillance, timeline. The surveillance footage of Lila and Alan at the restaurant was the first crack. But it was the bank documents that made the whole structure buckle. Alan tried to bluff, of course. He stood up with a voice like polished marble and claimed none of it proved intent. Coincidence, he said. Creative interpretation. He even accused me of manufacturing the evidence. Then Dana pulled out the kicker. An email from Alan to a real estate partner, dated 2 weeks before the divorce was filed. Subject: once the house is liquid, we're good. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked over his glasses. Counselor, were you in a romantic relationship with your client at the time of filing? Alan hesitated just a moment too long. Yes, he said finally. And that was it. The judge awarded me full ownership of the primary house, the cabin, the duplex, and all contested properties. He issued an order for restitution of liquidated funds, plus damages. The prenup was upheld in full. Lila's face drained of color as the ruling hit her like a closing elevator door. She looked at me once, like maybe she'd find pity there. I looked back with the same calm she used to call passive, only now it was power. Afterward, Dana handed me the final paperwork outside the courthouse. "Congratulations," she said. "You didn't just win, you dismantled her strategy piece by piece." "I didn't want revenge," I told her. "I know." I folded the papers neatly, tucked them under my arm. I just wanted her to know she never had me. Not really. And now she did. Alan Mercer was disbarred 6 weeks after the ruling. The Bar Association's inquiry moved faster than anyone expected. Turns out, they'd been keeping an eye on him long before my case made it to court. My evidence just sped things up. He was found guilty of professional misconduct, conflict of interest, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The letter came in the mail one morning. Official, blunt, and oddly satisfying. He won't be representing anyone again. Lila lost her appeal before it even started. The judge's ruling was too airtight, the evidence too overwhelming. Her assets were seized to repay what she'd stolen. The condo? Gone. The investments Alan helped her hide? Frozen. The car, the jewelry, even the wellness retreat account she'd quietly opened? Emptied. Last I heard, she was staying with her sister in Boise, the same sister she used to roll her eyes about at brunch, sleeping in a guest room with a mattress on the floor, fielding job interviews and trying not to drown in legal bills. She emailed once, just one line. "You got what you wanted. I hope you're happy." I didn't respond, but I saved it, just to remind myself how quickly a lie can unravel when truth gets involved. Then, a week later, she showed up outside the cabin. It was late, past sunset. I saw her silhouette in the headlights. She didn't get out, just sat in her car with the engine running, staring up at the porch like it belonged to her again. I walked down the steps and stopped at the edge of the gravel. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't ask why she was there. I just said, "If you come near me or my family again, you won't like what happens next." She left without saying a word, and I haven't seen her since. I brought black coffee and a slice of Dad's favorite pie, blueberry with too much cinnamon, and sat by the marker under a sky that couldn't make up its mind. The cemetery was quiet, the wind soft through bare trees. "I handled it, Dad," I said, "just like you taught me, quietly, precisely." I told him everything, about the trap, the court, the fallout. I didn't hold back. The way I figured, if he'd gone through all the trouble to plan for the worst, the least I could do was let him know he was right. I left the pie on the stone, even though I knew the birds would get to it before morning. 2 months later, the nature retreat opened. The cabin stayed intact, but we built a second structure beside the creek, a small lodge with 3 rooms and a screened porch that looked out over the water. No Wi-Fi, no TV, just books, trails, and silence. I named it the Weller Refuge, for veterans, for caretakers, for anyone trying to remember how to breathe. I used the cash Dad left in the safe, the extra land he tucked into the deed, even the furniture we'd stored in the attic, hand-built decades ago with a level of care no one takes anymore. People started coming in quietly. A school teacher from Portland, a nurse from Reno, a guy who lost his brother and couldn't talk about it until he sat by the creek, with a cup of strong coffee and a blanket of quiet wrapped around him. I didn't fix the world, but I carved out a corner of it. One my father would have been proud of. I live in the cabin full-time now. Mornings start early, nights end with stars. The house I lost doesn't cross my mind anymore. The life Lila tried to steal is a memory without sharp edges now. Just a shadow that reminds me of what I escaped. This life isn't loud, but it's mine, and it's solid. It arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between an electric bill and a catalog for hiking gear I didn't remember signing up for. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting before I even opened it. Looped, feminine, just a little too neat. Lila. I sat at the edge of the porch, the wind rustling through the pines, the scent of wood smoke still lingering from the morning fire. Scout, my German shepherd, rested by my feet, ears flicking once toward the envelope as if he, too, sensed what it was. I turned it over in my hands. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Maybe the mail carrier knew it wasn't worth the trip to the door. I opened it. One page. Thick, cream-colored paper. Same kind she used for our wedding invitations. Mark, I've had time to think. Too much, maybe. About what I did. About who I became. I was angry, scared, confused. I don't expect you to understand, but I want you to know I never meant to hurt you the way I did. I stopped reading. It didn't matter what came next. The excuses. The tears she might have faked even as she wrote it. The mention of hope or forgiveness, or the line people like her always use. I wasn't myself. She'd meant every move she made. She just didn't expect me to rise after the fall. I walked back inside and tossed the letter onto the fire. It curled quickly, the ink shrinking away from the heat. The flames ate the words, line by line, until all that remained was a whisper of smoke rising through the chimney and into the late afternoon sky. Scout stretched and settled again. I poured a cup of coffee, stepped back onto the porch, and watched the breeze sweep across the treetops. Another quiet day at the Weller Refuge. Another name on the wait list. Another person on their way to breathing easier. I had no room left for rage, no space for ghosts, just peace and pine, and the sound of everything finally staying still. Some things are better left in ashes, and some stories are better ended with the door shut, the locks changed, and the fire burning clean. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.